If you've been married for 40 years and still don't know exactly where or how to touch your wife, you're not alone. In fact, many men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s are getting it wrong, not because they don't care, not because they don't try, but because no one ever taught them what a woman's body truly needs, especially as both of you grow older. I'm Dr. John Kennedy. I'm a urologist and professor with over 3 decades of experience, helping men understand sexual health, intimacy, and aging. I've worked with thousands of couples, many who thought their best years were behind them, until they learned what I'm about to share with you today. Now, here's the part that might surprise you. According to brand new research, the places you've been taught to focus on, like the clitoris, might not even be at the top of the list anymore. And more importantly, there are areas most women wish you'd avoid altogether, not out of dislike, but because those spots can be too sensitive, painful, or simply don't feel good anymore. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly 3 places women over 50 want to be touched, and 3 they don't. And more importantly, I'll show you how to use this knowledge to bring back trust, connection, and even excitement into bedroom, no matter how long it's been. So stay with me, because later on I'll reveal the most misunderstood zone of all. The one that most men think is a turn-on, but that women secretly dread. You don't want to miss that. Before we dive in, if this topic matters to you and you want more honest, research-backed advice on intimacy, aging, and connection, go ahead and subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a future episode. And if you find this helpful, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback helps me make these videos better for you. Alright, let's get into what you came here for. Based on the most recent research involving hundreds of women, especially those in midlife and beyond, we now have a clearer picture of where women actually want to be touched, not just physically, but in a way that feels safe, welcomed, and deeply connecting. So here are the top 3 places women prefer to be touched, and why these areas matter more than you might think, especially as we grow older together. 1. The entrance of the vagina. This may come as a surprise to many men, but for countless women, especially as they age. The entrance of the vagina is one of the most emotionally and physically responsive places on their body. It's not about deep penetration or intensity, it's about presence, patience, and gentle contact in a place that carries both vulnerability and trust. Over the years, I've spoken with many women who shared that this area, when approached with care, made them feel seen, safe, and desired in a way that no other touch could. It's the threshold, both literally and symbolically, where connection begins. And for women in their 60s or 70s, whose bodies have changed, who may have experienced childbirth, menopause, or medical procedures, this area holds powerful emotional memory. When touched too quickly or too forcefully, it can feel invasive. But when approached with warmth, slowness, and attention, it can awaken a deeply intimate response. Think of it less as a gateway to something else, and more as a place worthy of attention on its own. Light circling soft pressure with the palm or fingers, paired with eye contact or a loving word, can make this moment meaningful, not mechanical. Many men assume that passion lives in the fast and urgent, but what women often crave, especially in later years, is the kind of intimacy that says, "I'm here with you, I'm not in a rush." It's not about technique, it's about intention. Touch here, when done with patience, can feel like an invitation rather than an expectation. That changes everything. And what's even more surprising, the next area women prefer being touched is one that most men barely even think about. Yet it holds an incredible amount of sensation. Let me show you where and why it might just change the way you understand your partner forever. Now, this next one is almost always overlooked. not out of neglect, but because most people simply don't realize how significant it can be. The area surrounding the urethral opening just above the vaginal entrance and below the clitoris is a small, delicate zone that holds more sensitivity than many men imagine. It's not often talked about even in medical settings yet. So many women describe it as a source of subtle but powerful sensation. I remember a patient, a woman in her late 60s, telling me with a quiet smile, "It's not the place I would have thought to mention, but when my husband touches me, there, softly, patiently, it feels like electricity. Not fireworks, but a gentle current that stays with me." That struck me, and it's something I've heard many times since. This area responds best to a feather-light touch. It's not about pressure or friction, in fact, less is more here. Using the tips of your fingers or even just a warm hand, resting gently near the area can be deeply intimate. The skin is thin, the nerves are close, and for many women, stimulation here blends the pleasure of physical sensation with a sense of being carefully noticed, especially for older couples, where the body may be more sensitive or where dryness is an issue. This kind of slow, attentive exploration can make all the difference. It's a way of saying, "I'm not just here for what's obvious, I'm here for you, all of you." And often it's these overlooked places that help women feel most cherished. But we're not done yet. There's one more place hidden, just a little deeper, that carries an emotional weight far beyond what you might expect. It's not only a source of pleasure for many women, it's also where trust lives. Let's go there next. Inner vaginal wall, upper front aka G-spot area. This final area isn't always easy to find, but when approached with care, it can create a type of connection that feels both physical and deeply emotional. The inner vaginal wall, specifically the upper front part, often referred to as the G-spot, is not just about sensation. For many women, especially in long-term relationships, it's about trust. It's about being touched in a way that feels intentional, attentive, and safe. I remember a couple in their 70s who came to see me wondering if they'd lost the spark for good. When we talked through their physical intimacy, the wife admitted she never liked deep or fast movement. What she longed for, she said, was the kind of slow, steady pressure on that inner wall, the kind that made her feel understood. "It's not fireworks," she told me. "It's a warm wave that starts small and fills the whole room." That inner front wall, just an inch or two inside and angled upward toward the belly, responds best to gentle rhythmic pressure, not thrusting. It's not about chasing sensation, but about creating a feeling of emotional presence. For older couples where physical limits or medical concerns might come into play, this kind of intimacy can feel even more meaningful. It says, "I know your body now, and I'm still learning it with love." Men often ask me, "How do I know if I found it?" My answer is simple. You'll know by how she breathes, how her body softens, how she draws closer rather than pulling away. It's in the silence, not the sound. But now we shift the focus. Because just as there are places that welcome touch, there are others that quietly, sometimes painfully, do not. And knowing the difference, knowing where not to go, may be the very thing that earns you her deepest trust. Let's talk about those next. Now that we've explored where women want to be touched, the places that invite closeness, comfort, and connection, it's just as important to understand the other side of the story. Because the truth is, no matter how long you've been together, there are areas on a woman's body that can trigger discomfort, tension, or even emotional pain when touched the wrong way or without invitation. And often these aren't the places men expect. In fact, some of them are areas many assume are always welcome. But the reality, especially as women age and their bodies change, is much more complex. So let's take a look at the 3 places women most often don't want to be touched and why avoiding them might actually bring you closer than ever before. 1. The anus. This is one of the most misunderstood and often misjudged areas when it comes to intimacy. While some media or modern conversations might suggest it's just another erogenous zone, the reality for many women, especially those over 50, is very different. In fact, according to recent research, the anus was the #1 area women reported not wanting to be touched. And their reasons weren't just physical. They were emotional, psychological, and deeply personal. Over the years, I've spoken with countless women who've shared that any unexpected or uninvited touch around this area brought not curiosity but anxiety. For some, it triggered feelings of discomfort or shame, especially if they weren't given the space to talk about it first. For others, especially those who've experienced trauma or medical complications later in life, this area became one of protection, not pleasure. One woman in her late 60s told me, "It's not that I don't love my husband. I just wish he'd ask or notice my body pulling away instead of assuming I'm okay with it." That kind of honesty is what so many women wish they could express without fear of hurting their partner's pride. The key here is simple but powerful: respect. If you're ever unsure, ask gently, without pressure. And if the answer is no, honor that without question. True intimacy isn't about pushing limits, it's about honoring boundaries. And here's the deeper truth. When a woman feels completely safe from unwanted touch, she's far more likely to open up in ways you never expected. That kind of trust builds everything else. But there's another spot even more surprising that made the list one most men would never guess, and yet many women quietly dread. It's a part of the body we often associate with depth and connection, but for some, it's exactly where things start to shut down. Let's go there next. 2. The cervix. Now this one often catches men completely off guard. The cervix is frequently misunderstood, sometimes even romanticized as a place of deep, intense pleasure. But for many women, especially those over 50, that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, in the same study we've been referencing, the cervix was one of the most frequently mentioned areas women wished their partners would avoid during intimacy. Here's what many people don't realize. The cervix isn't a deeper means better zone. It's a sensitive protective area at the very end of the vaginal canal, and when touched too aggressively or even just unexpectedly, it can feel uncomfortable, even painful. And for women who've gone through menopause, had children, or experienced gynecological issues, that sensitivity can increase significantly. I remember one woman in her early 70s telling me that every time her husband tried to reach as far as possible, she braced herself. Not out of fear, but from anticipation of discomfort she didn't know how to explain. She didn't want to hurt his confidence, but she was silently wishing he knew it didn't feel good. This is where listening becomes more important than performance. Slower movements, shallower depth, and checking in, even with a simple, "Does this feel okay?" can make all the difference. For many women, what they need isn't more intensity, but more attentiveness. If you're a man in your 60s or 70s trying to rekindle intimacy, learning where not to go can be just as powerful as knowing where to touch. And when you respect those boundaries, something else opens up. Emotional safety, trust, and true connection. Now the next place might really surprise you. It's a spot most men have touched without thinking twice. But for some women, it's become too much. Let's talk about it because understanding why could change how you approach touch forever. Now this one might come as a surprise. For years, we've been told that the nipples are one of the most erotic zones on a woman's body. And for many women, they absolutely can be. But what most people don't talk about, especially when it comes to women over 50 or 60, is how often this area becomes more uncomfortable than pleasurable. Hormonal changes, especially after menopause, can dramatically increase sensitivity in the breast tissue. What once felt arousing can now feel overwhelming, even painful when touched without care or warning. And yet, so many men reach for this area, automatically assuming it's always a green light. I remember a woman in her late 60s telling me during a quiet moment in my office, "I love that my husband still desires me. But sometimes when he goes straight for my chest, I just wish he would slow down and ask first. It makes me feel like a person again, not just a body." That honesty stayed with me, because often it's not about avoiding the area altogether. It's about how you approach it. The nipples are incredibly sensitive, and that sensitivity can shift dramatically with age, medication, or emotional state. Some days a light touch might feel wonderful. Other days it might feel like too much. The difference isn't always predictable, which is why the key here is presence. Noticing her breath, her body language, or simply asking in a soft voice, "Is this okay tonight?" When you take that kind of care, you're not just touching her body. You're telling her you're paying attention, that you're still curious, still learning her even after all these years. That kind of intention builds a different kind of intimacy, one that lasts. And if you're wondering how all this fits into the bigger picture, what it means for you as a man who still wants to feel close, needed, and connected, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share next might just reframe how you see yourself in this next chapter of life. A reminder for men who still want connection. If you're still here listening closely, that tells me something important about you. It tells me you care. Not just about physical touch, but about connection, about closeness, about showing up for your partner in a way that still matters even after all these years. And if no one said this to you in a while, let me be the one to say it now. That matters. You matter. The desire to stay connected, to keep learning to love more gently and more deeply with age, that's something to be proud of. So many men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s come to me wondering if they've missed their chance. Maybe their bodies have changed. Maybe intimacy has felt distant for a long time. Maybe they're afraid that what used to work no longer does, and they don't know how to start again. But here's what I tell them. And what I want to tell you now, it's never too late to reconnect. Not just with your partner, but with the part of yourself that still wants to give, to care, to explore. Connection at this stage of life looks different. It's not about performance. It's about presence. It's about making your partner feel safe, seen, and valued. Not just for her body, but for her whole self. And when you lead with that intention, something beautiful happens. She starts to let her guard down. Walls soften. Trust returns. And from that place, real intimacy can begin again. So don't give up. Don't assume it's behind you. Sometimes the most meaningful chapters in love come not at the beginning, but in the quiet, steady years later on. Now, as we wrap up, there's one final thought I want to leave you with. Something simple but powerful. A reminder that could reshape the way you touch, speak, and love from this point forward. Let's end with that. Final thought. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's that intimacy doesn't fade with age. It simply changes. And with those changes comes an invitation. An invitation to slow down, to relearn to listen more closely than ever before. Because what matters now isn't how much you know or how much you remember from the past. What matters is how present you're willing to be right now with the person you've chosen to love. We've talked about the 3 places women tend to respond to most. The entrance of the vagina, the area around the urethral opening, and the inner vaginal wall. And how these places, when touched with care, can open doors to connection you may not have experienced in years. We've also explored the areas women often wish their partners would avoid: the anus, the cervix, and in some cases, the nipples. Not because they don't trust you, but because their bodies are asking for something different now. Something gentler, something slower, something more thoughtful. And maybe, just maybe, this stage of life isn't about reigniting what once was, but about creating something entirely new. A version of intimacy that's built not on urgency, but on understanding. Not on routine, but on rediscovery. I've seen this transformation in so many couples. The moment when one partner chooses to listen, really listen, and everything changes. It's quiet, it's tender, and it's real. So if you're still wanting closeness, if you still long for her to lean in a little more, to trust you a little deeper, know this. It begins not with your hands, but with your attention, with your willingness to ask, to learn to care, in a way that touches more than just her body, but her heart. That's the kind of touch that lasts.